In the 1920s, truck drivers crossed entire states with no truck stops, no highways, and no heaters. Not on paved roads, not with reliable engines, on dirt tracks, through mud, dust, and open country. In trucks that broke down so often that every driver was also his own mechanic. And here's the part almost nobody knows. Many of these men spent 5, 6, 7 days on a single delivery, a trip that today takes 8 hours. No fuel stations for 100 miles. No diners. No motels built for drivers. No radio. No phone. If something went wrong, nobody was coming. So how did they actually do it? How did a man in 1924 haul freight across a country that had no infrastructure for him at all? The answer is one of the most fascinating survival stories in transportation history, and it starts with the roads themselves. Here's something almost nobody realizes about America in the 1920s. The country had almost 3 million miles of roads, and less than 10% of them were paved. The rest was dirt, gravel if you were lucky, and when it rained, that dirt didn't just get wet, it turned into a trap. Mud in the 1920s wasn't an inconvenience. It was the single biggest enemy of early trucking. A loaded truck could sink to its axles in minutes, and there were no tow trucks, no highway patrol, no one to call. Which is why every long-haul driver of that era carried the same 3 things, without exception. A shovel, heavy wooden planks, and tire chains. Getting stuck wasn't a possibility. It was a certainty. The only question was how many times per trip, and whether you could dig yourself out before dark. And the trucks themselves made everything harder. Early 1920s trucks rolled on solid rubber tires, no air inside, no cushioning at all. Every rock, every rut, every pothole traveled straight up through the frame and into the driver's spine. Top speed on those tires, around 15 to 20 miles per hour. Not because the engine couldn't go faster, because the truck would shake itself apart if it did. So picture the reality. A man hauling freight 300 miles at the speed of a bicycle, on roads made of dirt, in a machine that punished him with every mile. That trip took days, which created a problem the modern world has forgotten ever existed. Where does a truck driver in 1924 sleep, eat, and refuel when nothing exists to serve him? Start with fuel, because this is the detail that breaks people's brains. There were no truck stops. In most of rural America, there weren't even proper gas stations. Fuel was sold at general stores, hardware stores, blacksmith shops that were slowly converting into garages. A driver would pull up to a single-hand cranked pump, sometimes just a barrel with a hand pump on top, and fill his tank while the store owner cranked. And between towns, nothing, sometimes for 80, 90, 100 miles. So drivers did the only thing they could. They became their own fuel station. Steel cans of gasoline strapped to the running boards, extra oil, spare parts, inner tubes. Once pneumatic tires arrived mid-decade, valves, belts, spark plugs, gasket material, wire, rope. A long-haul truck in the 1920s wasn't just carrying freight. It was carrying everything needed to rebuild itself on the side of the road. Because breakdowns weren't rare events. They were scheduled. Drivers of that era planned trips, assuming the truck would fail. The only unknowns were where and how badly. Tires had to be patched by hand at the roadside. Overheated engines had to cool in the shade. Broken springs were reinforced with wooden blocks and wire until the next town. A driver who couldn't fix his own machine didn't finish his route. It was that simple. Now the question everyone asks, where did they sleep? There were no motels. The word motel wasn't even coined until 1925, and the first ones were built for wealthy motorists in automobiles, not freight haulers. So drivers had 3 options. Option 1, the truck itself. Men slept sitting upright in open cabs, wrapped in wool blankets or stretched out on top of their own cargo under a canvas tarp. In summer, some slept underneath the truck, using it as a roof against rain and dew. Option 2, auto camps. Through the 1920s, towns began opening free municipal campgrounds for the new wave of motorists. A patch of ground, a water pump, maybe an outhouse. Truck drivers used them constantly, a safe place to park, a fire to cook on, and other travelers nearby if something went wrong. Option 3, and this is the one that says the most about the era, farmhouses. Drivers knocked on farm doors and asked to sleep in the barn, and more often than not, the answer was yes. Some farmers charged a few cents. Many charged nothing in exchange for news from the cities or a hand with a chore. In remote stretches of the country, farm families were the truck stop. Dinner, a hayloft, hot coffee before dawn, an entire informal network of hospitality stretched across rural America invisible on any map. But every experienced driver carried it in his head. Which roads had good farms? Which towns had a mechanic? Which general store stayed open late? That knowledge wasn't written down anywhere. It was the most valuable cargo a driver owned. And then there was food, because a man working 16-hour days in the open air burns through calories fast, and there was no diner waiting at the next exit. So drivers ate the way soldiers and cowboys ate: bread, cured meat, hard cheese, canned beans, food that survived heat, cold, and days of vibration in a wooden box under the seat. Coffee was brewed on the roadside over a small fire, or begged hot from a farmhouse kitchen. In towns, the options were a general store counter, a boarding house table, or if the town was big enough, a lunch wagon. Those horse-drawn lunch wagons, parked near factories and rail yards, were the true ancestors of the American roadside diner. Truck drivers were among their most loyal customers, because a driver's schedule respected no meal times. Eat when you can, sleep when you can, drive while there's light. That was the entire rhythm of the job. Then there was the cold, and this part is genuinely hard to imagine today. Most early 1920s truck cabs were open. No doors, no side windows, sometimes no windshield, a roof, a bench seat, and the weather that was the office. In winter, drivers dressed like Arctic explorers. Layered wool, leather gauntlets, lap robes, thick blankets, strapped across the legs. The same gear used on horse-drawn wagons a generation earlier. Some wrapped heated bricks or soapstones in cloth and kept them at their feet. Warmth that lasted 2 or 3 hours before going cold. And at night, the truck needed more protection than the driver. Antifreeze, as we know it, didn't exist in most trucks. So every cold evening, drivers drained the entire radiator every drop to keep the engine block from freezing and cracking overnight. Every morning, they refilled it, bucket by bucket, from a well or a stream. Then came the starting ritual. No reliable electric starters on many trucks, just a steel hand crank at the front of the engine. In freezing temperatures, with oil thick as honey, cranking a cold engine to life could take 20 or 30 minutes of brutal physical labor. Some drivers lit small fires under the oil pan to warm it first, a technique that sounds insane today. In 1923, it was just Tuesday. Here's the twist in this story, the part that connects everything. All of it changed not because trucking demanded it, but because of a road. In 1926, the government stitched together a chain of existing routes and gave it a single name: Route 66. Around the same time, the numbered federal highway system was born, and paving accelerated across the country. And the moment predictable roads existed, something new became possible: predictable businesses. Gas stations appeared at regular intervals. Diners opened where trucks actually passed. Cabins for rent clustered near the fuel, the ancestors of the motel. And within 2 decades, all three merged into a single invention built specifically for freight drivers. The truck stop. Fuel, food, and a bed. In one place. On purpose, everything the 1920s driver had assembled from strangers, farmhouses, and steel cans, strapped to his truck, now standing permanently by the roadside. The infrastructure didn't create trucking. Trucking survived long enough to force the infrastructure into existence. And here's the thing that stays with you once you know this history. Ask yourself, what kind of person did this job? Days alone at 15 miles per hour, sleeping in barns and open cabs, repairing engines in the rain, digging out of mud with a shovel, hand cranking frozen iron before sunrise. There was no GPS, no dispatcher, no safety net of any kind. Just a man, a machine, and a promise that the freight would arrive. Every truck stop glowing on a highway tonight, every fuel island, every diner counter, every parking lot full of sleeping drivers, stands on routes those men proved were possible when nothing existed to help them. They didn't have the system. They were the system. So the next time you pass a modern truck stop at night, bright, warm, built like a small city, remember that, a century ago, that same journey meant a shovel, a barn, a hand crank, and a stranger's kindness at a farmhouse door. Those drivers didn't survive because the road took care of them. They survived because they knew something you didn't. Until now.